This episode of the 10-8 podcast is dedicated to the loving memory of Maria Menzel.
We do it for fun. We just do it for fun. Dirty ENT. We do it for fun. Bad boy.
Nelly, Diddy, Murphy, Lee. This is history, baby.
We do it for fun. Stack them rocks.
Come on now, and the band play it on. I see you, Cooler. Bad Boys 2, the soundtrack. Let's go. Yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whenever and wherever you're listening. My name is Officer Y, and this is it. This is the moment you've all been waiting for. This is the episode 1 of the 10-8 podcast, a podcast by cops, for cops, and really anyone that wants to show their support for law enforcement nowadays. Hopefully you had a chance to check out episode 0 for the past month, so I don't have to go over all the boring details about what this actually is, and we can go right into the fun stuff. I've spent a lot of time listening to podcasts as I began to make this idea into a reality. And I know that so many podcasts have their first couple of episodes and they're not really even listenable. You know, as the showrunners go back and they try to, reminisce, you can't even listen to them. It's a cringe fest. It's like watching rookie cops on TikTok. You just can't do it. Well, I didn't want to be that guy. Of course, I want to grow with this thing and improve it. And to improve, you're going to have growth. You're not going to be who you were when you started. I get that. But I wanted to start strong. So with that, I wanted to thank a couple podcasters that gave me some insight as I started this whole thing and tried to avoid the cringe fest. I'm just going to name a few. Definitely not an all-inclusive list. We have Nick from the Roll Call Room podcast, the Hey My Man podcast, which is run by Unit to Back on Instagram, and Ryan Mickler from the Order of Man podcast. Whether it's been directly or indirectly or just by listening to the things they've had to offer on their own podcast, they all put me in the right direction and really stopped me from procrastinating on this idea. And that's just on a business side. Of course, my personal life, friends, family, coworkers, girlfriend, dog, all helped me get my butt up and get to work. So thank you for all that. Today is also a celebration, though. It's a birthday party because it's the 1-year anniversary of the 10-8 Memes Instagram page. From someone, me, who was bored in a brand new apartment with no cable, no internet, and I was just sitting on my couch making memes to pass the time. And now I have over 14,000 followers. I have merchandise, and yeah, this podcast. I really want to say thank you to everyone that has reached out over the past year, giving your support, your insight. You really helped me transform this goofy page into something a little bit more. So if I ever helped you unwind through a crazy day after work, or even get you through a dark time, this podcast, this experience is for you. I really want to thank everyone for, this is a dream I didn't even know I was having. And it's just been a hell of a ride, so I really want to thank everybody. But enough of the sappiness, enough of the thank yous. Now to give you what you came here for. It's now time for the reason you turned on this episode. I told you that I wanted to start strong, and definitely strong I did. Several years ago, while I was working, I decided that I no longer wanted to be a report taker, but rather a case maker. And really, I think that's the role that every cop wants to be when they sign up to be a police officer or a trooper. Well, maybe not a trooper. I'm just kidding. No one wants to take theft reports and crash reports all day. If they did, they would go work for insurance companies. I mean, think about the difference, right? You would be inside all day in the air conditioning. You'd make way more money than a police officer, and the mainstream media and politicians wouldn't demonize you on a daily basis. No. You signed up to go to the police academy, to wake up early, stand in formation, attend classes, do the PT, learn defensive tactics, get pepper sprayed, take the taser ride, because you wanted to catch the bad guy, right? The adrenaline that comes from all that, the cool car, the cool duty belt, all that stuff. That's what it boils down to. To make a cheesy quote a little cheesier, you wanted to hunt the evil, that others pretend doesn't exist. Now, I know we all make fun of that quote because, yeah, it's cheesy as all hell, but let's be honest. When you first put on your uniform, day one, you were pumped. You were excited. Listen, it's just you and me right now. You can be honest with yourself. Yeah, you were excited when you put that uniform on. Or how about when you were sitting in the car by yourself for the first time? You threw on your license sirens. You went flying down the street to back up your buddies because they needed help. You got chills. But something may have changed. You lost that motivation, that drive, and that desire. The job started looking a lot more like a job and a lot less like an action movie. I mean, it's kind of hard to feel like a superhero when you've got a records clerk breathing down your neck. Hey, you messed up a citation. Or an evidence clerk. Hey, you didn't tag this right. And then you've got supervisors. You've got your squad mates. Hey, why isn't that guy taking as many calls as I am? You've got prosecutors. Hey, didn't I just arrest this guy last week? Why is he out so quickly? Right? It was a good, solid felony case. I get it. I was in a similar situation until I started making traffic stops that led to more felony arrests. Then the job started becoming fun again. There was really no rhyme or reason to my approach. Hell, for me, proactivity, I really thought I needed a radar unit, right? I thought, sit in a dark stretch of road, run my radar, pull over cars that were speeding by me, and make the big catch, right? That wasn't it. I just kind of wung it. But then a buddy of mine, who's a cop up in Pennsylvania, suggested that I join a Facebook group. So I did. When I joined, I had to submit my police identification and have the site verify me, which, most police departments, their SOP, their directives, their guidelines, very, very stringent on social media and your police identity. So I was a little nervous by it, but I did it anyway. And that's when I entered Oz. I entered the world of street cop training. The company, in my opinion, that is making policing great again. There's so much content on that Facebook page, and it's filled with cops like me, over 60,000 police officers who just want to get better at catching the bad guy. So I sat down, went through the page, and I drank the Kool-Aid instantly. I waited and I waited for an actual class to come to my area, and it seemed like it was just never coming. But luckily, they provide so much free content online that you can't not learn. So before you knew it, I was starting to make good grab after good grab, just taking these simple techniques that A, the company was putting out for free, and B, peer-to-peer learning was happening because other people were saying, hey, this worked for me, or no, this didn't work for me. Case law, procedures, it's great. So last December, I actually got a chance to take the class, and it changed my career. I actually got to meet the wizard himself. We call him Uncle Den. I will tell you that sitting in that training hall in Georgia and listening to him present was unlike any other police training class I've taken to date. You see, Uncle Den is not death by PowerPoint. He's engaging. I will tell you, the moment he started his presentation, I was in. It's engaging, funny, and you just learn a lot. Page after page of notebook paper I filled scribbling what he was talking about. And when you get out of the class, he gives you all the content. So after the class, I didn't sit down, but I walked up to Uncle Den. I met him, Dennis Benigno. I guess that's a more appropriate way to introduce him. And just kind of spiraled from there. He is the wealth of knowledge that the law enforcement community has needed. And let's all be honest, in a time where proactive policing is a dying art, and proactive police officers are sitting in the corner afraid to do anything like a beaten puppy, I'm here to tell you that Dennis Benigno and Street Cop Training is the entity that is going to give us our bite back, as long as you drink the Kool-Aid. So the moment I made the decision to go forward with this podcast, the first person that I knew I wanted to interview was Dennis Benigno. He is the owner, the founder of Street Cop Training. He has more than 14 years experience in law enforcement. So now, after that probably long-winded introduction, but trust me, He and his company are everything that I make it out to be. So without further ado, please sit back and enjoy the conversation that I had with Dennis Benigno. All right, we are back, and we are here with Dennis Benigno from Street Cop Training. How you doing, Dennis?
Hello.
All right, so just going to do a couple of questions with you real quick. So you are the owner of Street Cop Training, yeah?
I am.
So how did Street Cop Training come to be?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, basically, essentially I was watching people graduate the academy and having no practical skills, and then going into a field training program with people who gave them not much more than the ability to understand how our reports worked, right? Or how to run a radar unit. So you'd see all these guys and girls coming out of the academy essentially being lost, even after field training, not knowing what to do and being way behind the cusp of where I think they should have been. And then you see people that would field train with me, and they were doing far superior to what everybody else was doing. They were just so far ahead on the learning curve because they had gotten practical training on the job. So we would have a lot of people who would want to field train with me. Like, getting me as your field training officer was exciting for somebody graduating the academy. I was told that several times. And everybody else got stuck with whatever they got dealt, the hand they got dealt. Some other people were okay, you know what I mean? Some guys were really good as well. They did a real nice job. But overall, especially if you were on day work, you really had a horrible field training experience. So I couldn't field train everybody. Then we'd work with other agencies, and I'd watch them doing things that they, had no clue what they were doing. I mean, police departments essentially not even having the practical sense to understand basic case law and taking action or inaction in the field appropriately. Not because it was malicious, it's because they just didn't have any training. So I recognized that we had some real big issues, and I started to address them, dude. So it was, how do I get everybody through my field training program on the things that I found were the most practical, that were important for police officers to know. And that's kind of where it started. I started writing notes on the side of the road of all the things that I felt were important for all cops to know. I collected about 6 months of notes before I actually put it into a program, and I knew nothing about computers at the time. And that's where it started from, just a thought of, like, we need help.
Right. So did it start off as Street Cop Training, or was it something else at first? Or were you just kind of going around and doing in-service trainings?
No, I was doing in-service trainings. We initially did a class of about 7 of my coworkers. They agreed to sit through it. Basically, people who were more attracted to what I was doing, not people who were there to collect a paycheck, to do the bare minimum. Mm-hmm. People who were excited to learn more and get into the same kind of dynamic that I was doing. Essentially, I named the company NJ Criminal Interdiction in 2012 when I did my first class. I created an LLC. I was like, oh, name it that. That sounds good. And then I eventually changed it. So my first class I did there. I did a second one at another venue location. Of course, at that time, administration who pretended to be supportive. Mm-hmm. It was like a pain in the ass to get done. Then I decided, you know what, I'm not going to involve my police department at all. And we moved it over to a fire academy here in Jersey, and I put it out for free. For, I say 65, 70 people showed up, and I mean, it was a fraction of what it is now. It's completely different. But that was the execution, and even after that first one that I did for free, which was intimidating because I never talked to 65 or 70 cops from all different agencies. I didn't know everybody.
Right.
I don't even know if I knew anybody, to be quite honest with you. And for what it was then, which is a fraction of what it is now, people were like, yo, this is great. This is really, really good. Like, so I knew that I just built on it. Another program has like 5,000 hours into it.
Great. So why you said something about your administration not being supportive in the beginning? What was their kickback? Why were they not supportive? Did they not support the proactive side of police work, or?
I don't think it was that at that time. Now I've understand that it could be that, but just because it wasn't the normal thing, and 19 people had to give their opinion on me asking to use a hall and a projector, right? Like everybody had to get their say in what they thought. It happened, right? Some people were all for it. Some people were like, oh, I don't know if he could do that, blah, 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 blah. Like, it was just so silly where everybody's got to have their hand in the pot of decision making and all over basically nothing,
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you go from the transition, I should say, going from part-time, doing this while you're working the road, to now being at your full-time career?
Well, I was injured in the line of duty and was forced to retire in 2015. So obviously God had a plan. At that time, it wasn't something that I thought was going to happen. It did. I made peace with it. And now I see why it was done, why it happened, and certainly now having much more impact in the world versus being one cop as compared to the attention we have now and the training we're putting out.
Right, for sure. I mean, I took your class in Savannah, Georgia. I live in Florida, so I mean that's just showing the scope, and you started it in Jersey. So what would you say to a rookie cop, maybe fresh out of field training, as to what he should do to get his career off to the right start?
First thing is, let's run through some principles that I would tell people. Mind your own business. Doesn't matter whatever everybody else is doing here. There are going to be a lot of things that are unfair. Worry about you. Don't chase dangling carrots here. If they want you, let them call you. Not saying that's the way it's got to be done, but don't put yourself out there unless you have a fighting chance. 3, decide who you're going to be here. Right? If you're going to be the guy that goes sit at 7-Eleven with the other 9 mopes all night long, that's fine. But you have to decide. So if you're trying to do that, because whatever group you magnetize towards or find yourself attracted towards, whether it's us who are more proactive or they're good dudes, they just don't want to do anything. And for whatever reasons, that's their business, right? Like, we don't get into that debate of, how come they don't do anything? Let them do what they want to do, and we do what we want to do. So, don't forget where you're at, who you're making friends with, who you're palling up with. Choose you, choose yourself, pick yourself to go to training. People often complain, oh, they said I couldn't go to training this time. Like, if they're letting you go and there's no SOP that says you can't go to training, well, then go. Get yourself trained. I always find it comical that people will go to college for $80,000 to $100,000 and will be frugal with $199 to go put themselves through a one-day course that will actually have practical application in their career that you've chosen for the next 25, 30 years. Yet you're staring down the pipeline of $60,000 in college debt that you found out later on was completely useless.
Right.
So so pick yourself, be professional, model yourself after the guys and girls that are doing the work that you want to do. And it may not be the most popular decision to make, but it's not about your popularity at work. It's about who you are and who you want to be.
Great. So speaking of who you want to be, my supervisor said you can be a report taker or you can be a case maker. So what steps would you suggest for someone looking to make that change from being the guy that's just taking, lost property and whatever type of reports to going out there and becoming a strong, proactive cop?
Well, that's your decision to make, right? Like, so even if you don't have the perspective at your agency to understand what that looks like or how it's done, you have to go beyond the walls of your agency to find the answers to that. So that's just a self-decision of like, this is not how I saw myself being a cop. Maybe the agency that you're at doesn't want that, and then you have to pick yourself again to say, you know what? This is not the agency I saw myself working for. It's not lining up what I thought my career would be, because you have a lot of years to do, right? 20 to 30 years, depending on where you're at, of police work. The variable of happiness while you're doing that is tremendous. So picking yourself, and by the way, now you have the internet, like, right? There was no street cop training when we started. We had to, me and a handful of guys that I worked with that wanted to be proactive didn't know what to do. I mean, and, now you get a cheat sheet. Now you have the ability to get perspective. But you must seek it out. And not just from us, from all different dynamics and perspectives. So the answer is choose yourself.
Okay. What are some mistakes that you find officers may make when becoming or trying to become proactive?
I don't think there's any mistakes that aren't worth it. So there's going to be 1,000 mistakes you make when you're trying to learn how to do something and do it well. What I can tell you regarding mistakes is do not lose sleep over it. It's part of the process of growing and getting better. I mean, I make mistakes. I say things in class I shouldn't say. It happens all the time. We're in business. I'm making good decisions and bad decisions. But as I get more time in the field doing this, the better I get at it, right? So it's just all part of the learning process. Biggest mistake, if I can give anybody advice, one big practical piece of advice, do not act in a fashion that would reflect negatively on how you treat people. The nicer you are, the better this job is, and the easier this job is, and the easier it is to absolve yourself from accusations of police misconduct on people that you may have caught engaged criminal activity and now are filing a complaint. You'll get that reputation of somebody who's a good communicator. So the misbehavior of not knowing how to act and thinking that more bravado is the answer is incorrect. The answer is more kindness. You got to know when you have to take charge of a scene, but generally 99% of the time, you don't have to be anything less than professional, polite, and friendly. Even those who are committing criminal actions will respect and respond completely differently, and you'll achieve a larger objective.
Yeah, based on what you were saying, I remember, I think there's a video in the Facebook group where you're saying that you arrested a guy for who knows what, and he basically even said you were the nicest cop I've ever dealt with. So
every cop that is the person who's the best cop or one of the best cops to their agency is always going to be regarded as somebody who has that ability, that skill to communicate, be polite. You're just not going to get more. You're going to get more bees with honey, and it's not just me who gets that compliment. I promise you, there's thousands of cops around the country daily who are paid that compliment by people who are ready to go down to jail, being incarcerated, and are thankful for what? For the dignity and respect that you showed and gave to somebody.
Right, absolutely. So given the grand scheme of all police work, what do you believe is the importance of proactive policing?
I mean, this is an answer that comes with some just normal, sensical, making sense decisions, and it boils down to this. And I think about this all the time. Look, there has to be some availability of police work, right? So you got to make sure you have the right amount of resources to engage in criminal apprehension. What I mean by that is there's agencies that have one cop on the road. I can understand why those guys and girls don't have the ability to go out and be proactive. But if you do, how rewarding is it to take somebody off the street who was hiding out in the backseat of a car, and you were able to figure out who they were, and they were wanted for escape from prison for the molestation of a 4-year-old, right? Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the importance of it, it's hard to measure what the impact of it is, but we know that certainly we're interrupting people who are going to commit crimes. Even if they're dormant at the time, it doesn't mean that they won't take the opportunity to commit crime against society. So wanted persons, people who are preying on the elderly, burglars, people who are trafficking narcotics into your neighborhoods, into your towns. If we can interrupt that and stop that, which is very possible, right? Like even all the way down to, as crazy as it may sound, is interrupting or stopping somebody who may be wanting to go commit a large-scale atrocity. Mm-hmm. Being proactive and vigilant at that time may interrupt that, and we've seen that that's occurred. I mean, we've had that. Timothy McVeigh was caught after the Oklahoma City bombing by a vigilant police officer who was out being proactive. Who knows what would happen next, right?
Yeah, so. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So given everything that's kind of going on these days, what would your response be, or, as you're teaching people to senior officers or supervisor admins that say we don't do it that way when you start, taking that proactive route?
Well, there's two types of people that I can talk to. One I have no business talking to, and one I can talk to. Not having perspective and being open to hearing perspective, that's excusable, right? Like, we never knew we could do this. We never knew that this was police work. And then the other side of it is closed-minded, don't want to hear it. I'm not in the business of trying to sell the unsellable. If they're in charge and they're the ultimate person who grants permission or directs the ship, and they don't want to hear anything about it, well, I have no business or any time to begin to beg police administrations to change the way they do things. If they're open to hear it, look, I've taught, how many, over 10, 15,000 people at this point. And people do say, we didn't know this stuff. We like it. We didn't know. We thought this was that. But then you have the other side of it who are like, that's not how we do things here. Mm-hmm. Essentially, if you're a part of an organization like that and it doesn't match up with what you saw yourself in your career doing, it's time to move on to greener pastures, find a better place. And don't let people tell you, it's not always better on the other side. To that, I say BS, because it may be better on the other side. If you're too afraid to go experience that, well, that will be your own fault. What can I say to police administrations? Be open-minded. But unfortunately, that is not the reality of the dynamic of this profession, or it's riddled with people who are closed-minded, and that's a sad state of affairs. So you're either going to stick around and wait for that guy to retire or that girl to retire, or you're going to make a move yourself. So,
absolutely. Mm-hmm. So it is my hope that right now there's a cop listening to this, maybe going to work, maybe sitting at work, and they're now talking, through this conversation, they want to get that big bust, catch the big fish. What are some things that can be done right at this moment while working the street that any street cop can start implementing to start, finding these big catches?
On a obviously podcast or public, one thing I can tell you that will lead you to the answer to that is to join our Facebook group, Street Cop Training, on Facebook. It's a closed group at this day on September 1st, 2020, as we're talking here. We have a little over 65,000 police members. You're going to have to submit your information so we can approve you. There are things, but I can't educate the public, or I can educate the public, but I can't, I don't want to risk educating. And by the way, it's even a silly thing to think that somebody who is up to no good is listening to this at the moment.
Right. But there on the off chance.
Yeah, there are simple tactics that you can employ outside of playing laser tag with bumpers or running a radar unit that will certainly, simple stuff. I mean, simple things that will certainly return a greater positive impact on society, as we are tasked with the duty to protect our loved ones, our children, our neighbors, our friends, our family, all that. And that can be found in our group. This is not a shameless plug. It is an actual answer where I have to provide some, it's not secrecy. It's just that anti-police groups will do anything they can